Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. And on today's episode, we are back into the prospect well. I think I only have a couple more of these lined up. So as we're getting closer and closer to the draft, so we're going to be looking at interesting prospects today. Danila Yurov, Russian forward who apparently is good at everything, but there might be some red flags with that. So I have on the one and only Will Scouch today. So we're going to get into Yurov and if he might be an interesting pick for the Sharks at number 11.
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at Fear the Fin and San Jose Hockey Now. And first, I want to thank you guys for making us your first Sharks listen, free and available wherever you get podcasts. And of course, subscribe to us on YouTube. We're like 20 away from hitting 1,000. So if you haven't, please do so. Subscribe on YouTube. But today, so we're going to be, Will Scouch joins. We're going to get to him here in a second. He is impatiently waiting in the backstage right now. He can hear me, but he can't say anything, so it's kind of great. But so we're going to talk about Danila Yurov, forward out of Russia. If you're kind of new to the profiles, please go check out like the 20 that I've done so far. But if not, you can, you just want to listen to Scouch, and Scouch does have a cult-like following at this point when it comes to the draft community. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of profile Yurov. We're going to kind of look at his statistics, and I'll bring in Will Scouch to kind of give him more information on why he should or shouldn't be a fit for the Sharks. So Danila Yurov, right winger, plays for Magnitogorsk, I guess. Russian team. So he bounced between the MHL and the KHL. So a quick reminder, KHL is the top level league. Then the VHL is kind of like the Russian AHL, and the MHL is kind of like their juniors. So these guys don't have that that VHL type of team. So played most of his games in the MHL where he dominated. He had 13 goals, 23 assists for 36 points in 23 games. Puts him at a nice 1.57 points per game, which is pretty ridiculous. Also played 21 games in the KHL, but had nothing. And he was playing very limited minutes over there. So to discuss Danila Yurov, we have on, of course, friend of the show, BFF of the show, you might say, Will Scouch. Will, how are you doing, buddy?
Hello. I'm trying to match your energy from the beginning of the show there. Hello.
I was told, being a solo host, you have to kind of bring that energy. So
I felt it. I felt the energy.
I can tell it. Yeah. It's electric in here. Yeah, even though we're thousands of miles apart, it's electric in here.
I'm ready to party. 10 p.m. here in Southern Ontario, ready to go on a what is it? Wednesday night? Anyway,
it is a Wednesday night. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back and talk about some Danila Yurov.
So let's start with Yurov. So we were talking beforehand, and you said he does everything really well, but you're a little worried. So what does he do so well that's why is he such an interesting prospect? Let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a really good combination of fluid motion on his feet, a really interesting four-way skater, not a tremendous amount of speed to him, but he has enough to make it work. Not the most skilled guy in the world. He's not going to, dangle the pants off of three defensemen at the same time. He's not going to do that, but he's skilled enough to sort of move pucks around and pull pucks, create passing lanes and all that fun stuff. And just the way he processes the game, it seems like he builds a really good mental map of the ice, knows where guys are going to be. If he reads oncoming pressure, he can distribute the puck pretty well. He creates a ton of offense, especially at the junior level. Just a guy who doesn't have, maybe not the most dangerous offensive mind, but certainly creates a lot of offense for his team and can generate a lot of chances for himself. He's just a rock solid hockey player. Like, he's one of these guys where, there's nothing that I can point to that is a really concerning issue considering everything that's all put together, but there isn't anything that I sort of point to that goes, this is what's going to make this player special in the NHL. This is what's going to make this guy make his money. And that's kind of the part that gets me a little bit concerned, because not very many guys in the NHL are just guys that at the NHL level are good at everything. Mm-hmm. And generally I find that you kind of need something to make it your role, right? Like, you need something to really make a difference. And I think Yurov might be a guy who might be really good at maybe not having something like that, being like in a middle of a lineup somewhere and just sort of being a complementary offensive piece a really good one in that way. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, because he's one, who knows where his development's going. And like you mentioned off the top, didn't play a ton of minutes in the KHL. We can talk about his KHL play because I saw about all of it. But he didn't take very long.
Minutes.
Yeah, it took about 30 minutes. But yeah, I mean, we can talk about it. But he didn't look out of place in that league. He might have been a little outmatched, but he didn't look terrible. He drove pretty decent results at that level, which is good. It's just relative to some other KHL guys I've seen at his age, guys like Rodion Amirov, especially at his age. I think they were just a little bit better at finding a niche, finding a role, and making things happen in the KHL. So he's an interesting case study, and I'll be really interested to see what happens in the draft. I mean, he's a guy I could see drafted really high, but for a number of factors, I could see him slipping a little bit further than he should and maybe going to a team that's better than you would expect.
So you talked about his kind of a lack of, I guess, an elite skill, right? And is that, especially if you're drafting where the Sharks are at number 11, you're hoping, Dakota says hi, you're hoping that you get at least somebody, like at least one elite skill that you can be like, this is what I can bank on, right? Is there anything that could be a potential elite skill, like maybe if he works on his shooting, or maybe he works on his skating, or is there anything?
I think the way that he sees the game is better than a lot of players in the draft. Like, I think that does give you an advantage if you don't have those high level traits elsewhere. He does. Part of the reason he wasn't as effective in the KHL was because he is relatively quick, and he is pretty skilled, and is pretty physically resilient, and is pretty smart. But in the KHL, he wasn't really, none of those things were coming out. And none of those things are really standing out in a way that really sort of move things. Like, he had some pretty good off puck positioning, got a few scoring chances here and there, and I think he deserved to at least put some points on the board, even in limited ice time. But I mean, yeah, I think it is interesting. It is concerning that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, it is interesting to see how he plays in the KHL relative to the junior level. It does come out a little bit more. It gets more exacerbated. Well, not exacerbated, but everything looks a little bit better at that level, and he was driving really, really good numbers. So, yeah, I don't know. He's an interesting player.
All right, before we continue our Yurov profile and kind of dig into where he would fit in with the Sharks, let's take a quick break and talk to you guys about our friends over at BetOnline. Today we're doing Built Bar. I have it right here too, and I messed up. So Built Bar, if you guys don't know, the best tasting protein bar on the market, and they have another new flavor, the Coconut Brownie Chunk Puff. Every month, guys, they got new flavors. Go check them out. So the Coconut Brownie Chunk Built Bar is all the flavor you love in a delicious, chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate, and it's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop the joint and listen. They're also good for you. Low calorie, low sugar, high protein, all the deliciousness. And if you don't know which flavor to check out, they have a bunch of them. And if you want to, you can even get a box with all your favorites. So you just go in, you can actually, I think it's like 12 of them. You can pick out which ones you want, and they will send it to you. But if you want to check out the delicious coconut-rich, sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow, stop fantasizing, go to Built.com and get your order in right now. Use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. Again, use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, so he does a lot of stuff well. Doesn't really have that quote-unquote elite thing. And it feels like he was kind of a tweener right now between the MHL and the KHL. So, and you talked about his point production, which was non-existent, and you felt like he probably earned something. So do you think this might be just a thing where, another year next year where he kind of earns his ice time a little bit more, kind of gets put into better positions where he'll actually start producing here?
Yeah, I think one thing about his game that does stand out a little bit also above sort of that IQ level, I guess you could say, he brings is the physical resiliency. Like he's, it can be easy to look at a player who's young and say, oh, they're soft and easy to knock off pucks and they need to get a little stronger. And I don't think Yurov really has that problem. Like I've watched a couple of games of him prepping for this, and he was playing against the Belarusian national team and the Russian national team in an exhibition series. And he's playing against those guys and resisting pressure pretty well, and in those situations he was a little more confident with his skill, and I think that you can expect him to bring that next year. I think you could maybe trust him a little bit with some more minutes and see what he can do. Maybe some better line mates could also help him out a little bit. That team is Magnitogorsk is a really good team, and they might be able to sort of surround him with some better talent. So yeah, I think with that physical sort of resilience that he's got, and if he gets a bit stronger over the next little while through training and development, he might be able to be one of these more smart puck movers that's sort of strong on the puck that can generate some offense through that. And then that, you keep developing the skill and that sort of flashier side that he does have, just not at a really high enough level that I think can project to the KHL right away. But he has other supplementary things that I think make up for it, largely driven through his mind, but the physical strength that he's got right now and his ability to hold on to pucks and look for options and find options that are secondary is also really, really interesting.
All right, so what's his kind of timeline? I know there's a lot of issues, especially with Russian prospects coming to America, and especially with everything that's going on right now. And there's a lot of teams that are just not drafting Russians this year, especially with everything going on. But in a normal circumstance, when do you think he would be kind of making his debut into the NHL, or making an impact in the NHL, I guess is the better question.
Yeah, I think he's a player that you can be patient with, because he is a bit of this blank slate that has a lot of pretty good traits, and you don't want to rush him. Obviously there's uncertainty in Russia, but I think the way that I'm looking at it is it's really hard for me to gauge from an outsider's perspective, like how this is going to affect each individual player. And I think it's going to matter. Like from one player to the next, things might be very different. From one team to the next, things might be very different. I always think about it as you have the luxury of time with European players and Russian players. Would I say that something like a Vasily Podkolzin-esque trajectory of 2 years and straight to the NHL is a thing? I don't know about that, but I don't think that's too outlandish. But I would think that like 3 years, kind of, you give him some time to, go from however many minutes it was this year, like 2 minutes a game, to maybe a solid 8 or 9, and then a solid 12. And then maybe after that, he has a campaign where he's a pretty serious player for Magnitogorsk. He gets to stay home, play with a team that gets to pay him money. And, there's no real pressure to adjust to a completely different lifestyle in North America with all the craziness going on. That's entirely separate as well. So, yeah, I think the team that drafts him should have a long-term outlook and have flexibility in mind, because, patience always matters with prospect development. Like 4 years can feel like an eternity, but in the terms of a hockey career and how much difference that can make for a young player to really get comfortable at every level and come along slowly can really make a big difference. So my hunch says at least 2 years, probably 3 would be my estimation based on where he is.
And we kind of touched on it a little earlier, where his range, like, of where he might get drafted. And it's kind of, I don't want to say it's like Brad Lambert, where you hear Brad Lambert might be like a top 8 guy to like late first round type of guy. It kind of feels like Yurov might be in the same type of boat, where it's like, oh yeah, I could see him going 8, 9, 10 to some team in the 20s that's gonna, like, a really good team that doesn't need him to produce right away, right?
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I think that obviously if a team talks to Magnitogorsk or talks to his agent or whatever, and they have like a plan, right? It's like, okay, he's going to sign an extension for 3 years. After that point, if he wants to go to the NHL, that's up to him, whatever. And like they have that down. It's like, regardless of what's happening, that's the plan, and there's an agreement there, that could mean that he could go, the high end of where I would probably rank him, like I have him at 16, but the highest where I'd start to think about drafting him might be 9 or 10 ish, 8 to 10, somewhere in there. And that's if there's like, hey, here we will guarantee that we will sign an entry level contract in 2 or 3 years, depending on what Danila wants or whatever. I'm like, okay, cool, like whatever, go nuts. As long as you play him some minutes, we're happy. Like that's what we want. And
Stevie Yzerman's going to draft him, and then he's going to be like an insane star in 5 years.
Probably, right? Like the touch of gold. But yeah, I mean, I think otherwise, like if you're a team that's just drafting him and like fingers crossed he comes over and you don't really have that situation, if it gets to around like the middle of the first round and he's still available, he becomes one of the more interesting options out there. I know some people have him ranked a little later, and I think that some people who are more skeptical about the relationship with Russia might have him not ranked at all, or ranked even later than that. But yeah, I mean, I fall somewhere in the middle and think that, he's a rock solid first round pick, a really nice blank slate to work with. And yeah, like I'd start thinking about him in that early teens range as a guy that I think could be a really interesting pickup if you want to turn him into one of those possession jack of all trades guys. Like the name that comes to mind is like Jesse Puljujarvi, a guy who was scoring a lot at the junior level, and really, really scoring a lot. And now he hits the NHL and everything's good. You can see him and the talent that he has, and the analytics look really good, but the points aren't quite really what you would expect. But he's a really good sort of 200-foot guy that can do kind of a bunch of different things. And that's been after a few years of sort of finding his role and settling into it in the NHL. So maybe there's a bit of like that of an echo down the road with Yurov. And I think that would be perfectly acceptable in that sort of early teens to mid first round, area, if you're getting a guy that can drive results that way, even if they're not scoring 80 points a season.
Yeah, I think too, especially maybe a team, you look at the teams that have like 2 first round picks, so maybe like a Columbus at number 12, Buffalo at 16, maybe the Ducks at 22, or I think they're at 22, something like that, where it's like, you can take a guy at the first round, and then if Yurov's there, I think like it's kind of a nice little safe pick for them. That's, you think he's going to contribute in the NHL at some point. So before we continue, got to take a quick break and just let you guys know about, of course, Locked On NHL. If you guys don't know, come on, Locked On NHL, it's got you covered for all your playoff coverage, and you get to hear the latest news and opinions from local experts every Monday through Friday, and it's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Okay, so is there a worry that he just may never come to the NHL? I guess that's always a worry with drafting Russian players, right?
How many times has that happened? How many times has a Russian player never come over? Not
just that, but maybe do you think where he just doesn't develop those skills and traits and type of thing? Or,
I mean, yeah,
there's always that worry. Yeah.
If he's not getting KHL minutes and he's playing in the MHL again next year, I think that's a disservice to him. Yeah. If he's playing 3 minutes a night in the KHL again, then that's also a problem. And someone like Vasily Podkolzin had the luxury of going to the second division team there in St. Petersburg and playing big minutes on that team. That's what he did as a draft eligible too. And Yurov doesn't really have that luxury. So if he's not playing like a middle six everyday role player for that team, or a top line guy even, then they're not going to play him there. So, he's probably going to need to have a pretty good year to get off on the right track development wise. But I don't know. I mean, I think there is always a concern of like, I think the concern is like, you have to think about where players like Yurov get drafted. Yep. If he's drafted 5th overall, I could easily see a lot of universes where we look back and go, man, there were quite a few players that have like X factor this or this. Yep. that you would really like to have, like Jonathan Lekaramaki shooting the puck, like Yurov doesn't shoot like that. He doesn't have the same sort of scoring touch from distance that a guy like Lekaramaki does have, that is really, really special. And Yurov might just be a serviceable NHL player, or like a few other players that he reminds me of in the past who have this sort of jack of all trades archetype. They kind of struggle to find a job in the NHL. Like they just kind of don't really have that role. But I think Yurov is smart enough and physical enough, resistance wise, and strong enough and really honestly just smart enough to get something done. You can be a guy who can be a catch and release passer, a one-touch player primarily, really good mental mapper of the ice, and he has some finishing ability as well. So I think there's a number of different roles he could play in the NHL. It's just a matter of like how important those roles will be relative to the other guys that get drafted around him. But if you get him at 18 and you get something like that, then yeah, that makes a lot more sense to me and feels like a better situation to end up in when you look back on it in a few years.
All right. So if he hits his if he hits his ceiling, what type of player is he? And what's, like you kind of said, what's his outcome? Is what, a middle six guy, you think?
Yeah, I think he could be a perfectly reasonable, like if things go well, I think he'd be a good sort of, second line auxiliary winger. You could put him with a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, for example, and he's always going to probably know where Johnny Gaudreau is and always know how to hit him with passes, even if Yurov isn't maybe the most guy who's in most motion. He's a guy who I think his defensive engagement is a bit of an issue, but I think with time and a bit more development to the pace of his game and his feet could be a bit of a better defensive player in that situation. But he's a guy that I think is going to make a lot more money for himself, just sort of being a really smart offensive breakout contributor, a good pass first guy who can also build up some good momentum as well. It's just going to be a matter of what develops the most over the next little while, because a variety of different things I think could come out of it, and sort of get a lot better than other traits that could bring him more one way or the other. It's a tough thing to see with him because it hasn't happened yet. It's so up to the player and the team and what they think is best. But if it were up to me, I would like to see a bit more skill development out of him, a little bit more pace in his game. Really sort of use his strength to sort of push defenses back a little bit more, and just gain a little bit of that speed first edge in his game that I think he kind of lacks at really high levels right now.
All right, of course, Locked on Sharks. Even though Kyle's not here, I'm still on a mission from God to find William Eklund a friend. It kind of feels like their games might be a little similar. I mean, Eklund, I think, is a more talented player, but how would they play together?
That's an interesting thought I haven't thought of, but they are somewhat similar. I think Yurov is a maybe more thick version, like maybe more of a THICC than Eklund, who is more of a burner.
Yeah.
And I think he has more skill and that came out, that speed and skill came out a bit more at high levels. But Yurov, it's an interesting idea to think about the two of them as teammates, maybe not line mates, but
yeah.
I don't, you're talking about finding William Eklund a friend. I think about all the other guys they've drafted that also will need people to play with. Guys like Daniil Gushchin and Brandon Coe, Tristan Robbins, and Ozzy Weisblatt. Like all these guys are potentially wingers at the next level, and so might be Danila Yurov. I've seen him play center, but most of the time he was playing on the wing. And he's a nice sort of foil, I think, for those types of players where it's just sort of no nonsense, simple, effective hockey. And those other guys are much more sort of high octane, high skill, high speed, like taking risks, taking chances. And Yurov, I think, kind of mirrors that pretty well in his own way, which could work. Would I draft him at 11? Like, I could see it, sure. Like I wouldn't be against it, especially considering the volume of sort of speed and skill that's in the roster already or in the system. But yeah, it would be an interesting call. I'd be curious to see how he does. Maybe not the best line mate for a guy like William Eklund, but based on the stable that they've built, might be a good idea to try him out with some of these other guys that are on their way in.
Makes sense. All right. Where does he go?
Jeez. Well, first,
this is coming. It's not like
I know. I always forget though.
Yes.
My first instinct is Buffalo. They drafted 2 Russians last year. I think he could be there at 16. And if he's there at 16, he's a pretty decent option. And they drafted a somewhat similar guy last year in Isaac Racine, who's this sort of jack of all trades, offensive leaning guy that, you don't really know what he's going to be, but you can kind of see the benefits. And at the junior level, he played a lot better and showed a lot more of his potential. I feel like Buffalo's not really afraid of those types of players and sees value in them. I feel like at 16, that would be an interesting idea. And other than that, I mean, I'm not sure what else jumps out and makes sense to me. I mean, you mentioned Columbus at 12, but I don't know. I get the feeling that since Buffalo's dipped into the Russian pool a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised to see them look his way.
Makes sense. All right. We're like 2 weeks from the draft now.
Yep.
Oh my God, I can't believe.
I know.
Give me a surprise guy who might go in the top 10.
A surprise guy that might go in the top 10. Well, everybody's talking about Cutter Gauthier.
I know the Locked On Sens guys love him at number 7. So
they're told to. A surprise guy in the top 10. I'm going to throw Yuri Kulich in there. I want to see Yuri Kulich go in the top 10 and see a team just go full banana mode, just go full crazy mode after a pretty good under 18 from him. I love Yuri Kulich. I think it would be a pretty crazy thing to do in the top 10. It would be kind of like when Elias Anderson went in the top 10, where the expectations almost immediately just become way too high. But I love how he shoots the puck. I love how he sort of plays with the right mindset. He's physical, but doesn't get away with it as much as he could because he plays at a high level in the Czech Republic. But a guy that I've really, really liked watching this year and was really happy to see the under 18 play as well as he did. So we'll say him because there's other ones that are out there that everyone's talking about, but I want to see Yuri Kulich in the top 10.
That's a fun one. All right, Scouch, of course, you've said it all. What do you have coming up next?
Oh, God. Well, we've got the Scouching mock draft on the June 23rd, which as of recording is tomorrow, and JD is participating. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time, which is 5 Pacific.
I have the fourth pick. I need to trade whoever has 11. So I can
There's no trading allowed. No shenanigans allowed. None of that.
No, I just want to just trade the spot. I don't want to.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Well, have fun with that. And yeah, so as well, the McKeen's draft guide just came out. I've had some stuff in there with my video team that we've put in there. It's a great read. I've flipped through it over the last little while. It's a good time. YouTube is always active. The last couple Scouching reports are on the way. Patrons have all but one. The last one, which is yet to be shot. And the rankings are coming out. I finalized them today, hoping that the video and written stuff is out next week. And the last thing, it's been busy. I've got some free data tools to look at my track data that I've got for guys that I've done a big sample of that you can find pinned on my Twitter homepage. They're on my Tableau profile as well, which I obviously right now can't remember the URL of because I've never given it out publicly. But it's on there somewhere. And I think that just about does it. I will be in Montreal for the draft. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah. Nice. McKeen's got us some nice little media passes, so that's going to be fun. Really, really looking forward to it. It's going to be a ride.
Last question. So we're like 2 weeks out. Who do you think the Sharks drafted 11?
Who do I think the Sharks drafted 11?
Yep, you're good.
I want it to be Brad Lambert so bad. I want to channel Doug Wilson Jr. so bad and just like zone in and go, man. I hope you see what I see in this guy, because him up the middle of the ice with guys like Gushchin and Coe and Robbins and insert whoever the hell else you want on the wing. It would be fun.
The lack of scoring, you don't care. Yep.
Yeah, no, I don't care.
Okay.
That's what Daniel Gushchin's for.
That's a fair point. Daniel Gushchin, known scorer.
All
right, of course, you can find the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. You can also listen wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Odyssey. You guys know the whole deal. YouTube, please, like 20 away from hitting 1,000. I want to be. I'm the fifth show. I'm gonna be the fifth show of the NHL. So
all right, let's get there. We'll get there.
Come on, Scouch.
Yeah.
Get your minions. Get your minions.
Choo. Yeah. Yes. Let's go.
Yeah. The goal is to buy the draft. I think I'm gonna hit it. So, but let's make sure this is the day. So, and then tomorrow I'm gonna be doing no live show because I'm gonna be doing the Scouch mock draft. So I'm gonna be doing Couture, and next week William Eklund's on the books. So William Eklund back next week for the yes. So make sure you guys subscribe for that. And all right, guys. Bye, friends.